New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is criticizing former Vice President Joe Biden over the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, which was signed into law in 1994. Biden, who was a senator from Delaware at the time, wrote the legislation. It is the largest crime bill in U.S. history and increased funding for the hiring of police officers and the building of prisons. Here's Biden discussing the bill on the Senate floor before it was voted on in 1993.
We don't. They will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And, Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society.
Critics of the bill, like Mayor de Blasio, have called it a mistake and say that it contributed to a mass incarceration crisis. And Mayor Bill de Blasio joins me now. Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Elaine.
So in an opinion column in Thursday's New York Times, Bret Stephens says Joe Biden should be proud of the crime bill because it helped make the country safer. You disagree with that. Why?
Yeah, Elaine, Bret Stephens wrote that column. He couldn't have been more wrong, and he absolutely ignored the hundreds of thousands of Americans unjustly sent to prison for long periods of time, the families torn apart, the effects of mass incarceration we are feeling to this day in New York and all over this country. And look, the crime bill was the foundation of that horrible era of mass incarceration. Look at the fact that so many people who had committed very minor offenses were sent away for so long. Look at the fact that the bill had a disproportionate impact on African Americans and Latinos, and again had a horrible impact on families that we're still feeling the effects of right now. That bill was a huge mistake, and we got to be clear about it, and we can never go back to mass incarceration. So, the nominee of the Democratic Party has to be someone who says very clearly, mass incarceration was a huge mistake, the crime bill was a huge mistake, we're going forward in a whole new direction. And the other thing that the whole column got wrong was New York City, we are safer every year. We're the safest big city in America because we moved away from mass incarceration. We're arresting a lot fewer people. We arrested 150,000 fewer people in 2018 than 5 years earlier, and we got safer. We're not punishing people and trying to send them away. We're actually trying to work with communities, particularly to help our young people lead productive lives. We're not treating them like predators. We're treating them like human beings. And it's making a huge difference, and that's making us safer.
Why do you feel that focusing on the crime bill and on former Vice President Joe Biden, his support of the crime bill, is the political strategy that you want to pursue right now?
Look, a columnist in the New York Times today attacked me for saying out loud that the crime bill was a mistake. And that we had to end the era of mass incarceration. And to be fair, it was a conservative columnist, Bret Stephens. But he was telling Joe Biden, be proud of the crime bill, own it and say it was a great thing. That's a huge mistake. And I'm just speaking up and saying, no, that's an absolute misunderstanding of what happened over these years. New York City has gotten safer and safer because we moved away from that kind of divisive approach, that focus on arrest, that focus on mass incarceration. We got safer because we're actually trying to bring police and community together with mutual respect. And we are not going to allow people of color to be treated as if somehow they are lesser, particularly our young people. In this city, under my predecessors, there was stop and frisk for a long time. Young people, young men of color, were treated like they were guilty of crimes that they never committed, they had nothing to do with, and they were consistently portrayed in a negative light. We ended all that and started respecting our young people of color and our communities of color. And it's made us safer. It's led us to the situation that we can heal the wounds of the past and bring police and community together. But the columnist in the Times today was suggesting that, let's celebrate the crime bill, even though thousands and thousands of families were torn apart. And I'm not going to stand for that. I spoke up and I said that's an absolute misunderstanding of history. And look, Vice President Biden was one of the people who brought us that crime bill. He needs to own up to that.
While we have you, I'd also like to ask about Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Wednesday remarks. He declined to clear President Trump of obstruction of justice. However, noted Justice Department policy prohibits indicting a sitting president. What's your response to that?
I think Mueller sent all the possible signals he could have that there needs to be a much fuller investigation by the Congress of this president. I believe it will eventually lead to impeachment. I think Mueller should be called to testify. He obviously has a lot of perspective here that we need to hear as the American people. So I think that's where it's ultimately going to go. But I've also cautioned my fellow Democrats to put more energy into talking about the concerns of working Americans than just focusing on impeachment. There's an obvious reason why we need further investigation, but my fear right now is the entire dialogue about what's happening inside Washington. And the people who sent folks to the Congress representing the Democratic Party are expecting results for working people, and they're not seeing it. So I think we got to get the horse before the cart here. The first thing our members of Congress have to do is pass an infrastructure bill, even if Republicans won't go along, act on health care, act on the kitchen table issues, while pursuing an investigation that I think will ultimately lead to impeachment.
So to be clear, you do not think that Congress should begin impeachment proceedings right now?
No, I think it would backfire. I think in the first instance, we have to remind ourselves why people voted for Democrats to represent them in the Congress, because they wanted action on health care, because they wanted to address the economic problems that everyday Americans are going through. Working people are hurting in this country, and they expect Democrats to do something about it and not just continue the status quo. Well, right now, unfortunately, you turn on the television, you go online, what do you see? Democrats constantly caught up in a discussion that's an inside Washington-only discussion. Let's work on the issues that matter to working people and continue those congressional investigations, build up more evidence against the president. I'm sure it will be there over time. And the day will come when that critical mass is available where we can actually win an impeachment vote. That day's coming. I don't think that's today, but that day is coming.
We are now less than a month away from the first Democratic presidential debate. You've qualified for that debate by reaching the 1% polling threshold, but you were one of the last Democrats to launch a campaign. How are you making up for lost time in fundraising?
Well, look, the beauty of this process is that so many people in the early states especially care and they're paying attention, but all over the country too. I've just started my campaign the last couple of weeks, but I'm already getting my message out. You're right, a number of polls put me at that qualifying level. But look, we've got 8 months till the Iowa caucuses. I've already been out to Iowa a couple of times. I've been to Nevada. I've been to South Carolina. I'll be going to New Hampshire soon. Folks are paying attention, and I talk about working people. I say, this has to be the party of working people. Our government has to put working people first. And I'm very blunt about the fact that we have the ability to solve a lot of the problems in this country, but we have to be clear about who has the money and who doesn't. I say there's plenty of money in this world and there's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands. And I find that voters all over those early states, they respond to that because they want the blunt truth. They understand that the wealthy and powerful have done better and better in recent years because of federal policies. They want to see working people put first again. And that's what I'm talking about. And I think it's a powerful message, and I can back it up with experience. I've done it in New York City, the kinds of things that help working people, pre-K for all, paid sick leave. We're guaranteeing health care for all New Yorkers who don't have insurance. When I talk to folks in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, they are really moved by the fact these are not just words or position papers. These are things I've actually done for 8.6 million people, running what is undoubtedly the biggest, toughest, most diverse city in America. So that word's going to spread, and I feel very good about where it's going to take me.
And what do you think about the DNC doubling the threshold for the third and fourth debates?
I'm still looking at the way they've gone about that. I'm concerned that we have to make sure that all voices are heard. I haven't seen all of the specifics yet, and I want to take a look at that and have more to say. But the one thing that's clear is the American people want to hear a diversity of voices. They are comparing and contrasting. They like having a lot of options. We should be careful that the party doesn't start choosing sides and limiting the options of Democratic voters.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Mr. Mayor, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Elaine.